at home, what we're doing in the United States to support the war effort. One thing that was created in order to have enough raw material to support the war, Woodrow Wilson established the War Industry Board, and this coordinated factories across the country, agricultural production, everything that we would need to send to our troops and to the Allies. The Food Administration Board, they were controlling consumption, how much food each American was consuming at that time. They established things like Meatless Mondays, where Americans weren't allowed to eat meat. Wheatless Wednesdays.
What?
Yeah, it was all in the name of conservation.
Wait.
No Taco Tuesday, exactly. Yes, was it?
No, are they like?
Forget the Taco
Are
Tuesday.
they just say like killing the Tipsy Tuesday?
They're not.
That sounds weird.
What they were doing.
Tuesday? Not like that.
Chibueze just asked a really good question. So you asked, were they starving the American people? Is that what you asked?
Yeah, starting without their protein. What? No. Beans. What? That's why you eat beans.
No. So what they were.
Beans are for. Hey guys, let's not make comments out loud. Raise your hand if you want.
What they were doing was by not consuming meat, that would be more meat that they could send to Europe. They could send it to help the troops. By conserving, they wanted American people, like everyone was helping in the war effort. Kids were helping, seniors were helping, new immigrants were helping, African Americans, women, didn't matter where you were, the entire country was united in this war. It wasn't just soldiers. Nina, Hannah?
So like, couldn't they just have like, I don't know, couldn't they just have become like vegetarian for like just the period of the war?
Well, yeah, that would be a sacrifice. If you were becoming a vegetarian at this time, it'd be patriotic. You're doing it to help your country. That was the propaganda. You weren't using as much resources, so you were helping. Hannah, you have a comment or a question?
I have a question. So what if it's like they had their own pig and then they killed it and they were like they can eat that meat just because like they wouldn't be sending their own pig to the war, right?
It wasn't. If they were like a commercial farmer and they were selling their pig, then they would be.
No, they wouldn't be selling it.
Yeah, I guess in that instance, I guess they would
Hey,
be.
creating person. We're not talking about.
Did Germany ever come, did the Central Powers ever come really close to winning the war?
At the early stages of the war, they did. And again, we're talking about the home front. We're not talking about what's going on in Europe. But the early stages, when they invaded through Belgium, they came within 25 miles of Paris in the first year of the war. So they did come really close. And then when during the Russian Revolution, when Russia dropped out of the war, they had a huge advantage in terms of numbers. But you're going to learn about tomorrow with the trench warfare. They kind of got bogged down. And at one point it was sort of like a stalemate. So earlier in the war, they definitely had an advantage. It looked like they were going to win. But the Allies had inferior weapons. But you'll talk about that more tomorrow. But the answer is yes. Just
Was Russia a central power?
they were an allied power. So it was united. It was Great Britain, France, and Russia.
So you guys remember who's the leader of Russia?
Putin.
Nikki. Tsar Nikki.
Sorry.
Tsar.
And the other one's Putin. And he gets overthrown by Lenin.
Putin.
So we're sticking to the home front. Okay, Christian,
How are they related?
Let me get everyone to refocus just for a second. So we're talking about the home front. Another thing that you could do that was super patriotic, you could grow a victory garden. Rather than going to the grocery store, rather than going out and buying all this food that could be sent to the troops, you grow your own garden. And that was done. That was something that everyone could do. And they had propaganda posters. They said, grow a victory garden, support the troops. Okay, next one.
Yeah. Like that. Oh my God.
There we go. Who can tell me what's going on in these pictures, or who wants to read? What is this? Can you read it?
Yeah, on patriotic Rashi points won't worry me.
So you got that? As patriotic as can be, and ration points won't worry me. Ration is like rationing the food supply, rationing how much food you can get. So yeah, so she's got all her pickled vegetables. She's okay with. I mean, what do you think that means? Mina. Oh, sorry to interrupt. Let's give Mina a chance. Go for it.
I think that she's saying that of course she can like cook with this stuff because of course they make a portion to the
Sort of. I mean, what she's saying is she's patriotic, so rationing, it's okay. She's putting this food off to the side, so that's all right. And here you have a farmer. You'd think of like a patriotic poster being a guy with a gun, a soldier, but this is a patriot. This is a guy with a pitchfork holding lettuce or cabbage or something like that. And that's how they showed patriotism. All right, next one. So World War I, it was extremely expensive. Woodrow Wilson, the United States, they had to come up with a way to finance this war. So the war, it cost $32 billion. One way that Woodrow Wilson was able to raise funds is by increasing taxes. He went after the wealthiest portion of Americans. Some extremely wealthy Americans were taxed up to 70% of their income at the time of the war, and that was to finance so buying weapons, supplying food, helping the Allies. Another, probably more influential thing that America did was they purchased war bonds. What a war bond is it's a loan. So, for instance, if the United States, if they need money for to fight a war, I'd give them a loan. I'd give them $100 in order they could use that $100 to buy missiles, to buy tanks, to buy whatever they need to buy. And then they would give me a war bond, a victory bond, or a liberty bond. I could cash it in later, after the war was over. The government would pay me back. So the American people, they were investing in the war. Yeah, pretty much. So $20 billion of the $32 billion was raised in this way. Just like.
Do you get back how much you paid, or more or less?
More. But the United States, they were in, like, at the beginning of the war, we hardly had any debt. I remember when Woodrow Wilson ran for president, his first re-election, he ran as the president that kept us out of war. We had very low debt, but because of these war bonds, we took on like over $20 billion worth of debt. And this was debt owed back to the American people. So the United States government, the Americans were financing this war. This was everyone. This would be kids at school. You'd be collecting quarters. You'd be anything you could do. Everybody was supporting the war fund. Everyone was buying bonds. Celebrities, movie stars, they were doing campaigns. They were. It was extremely popular. Everyone was buying war bonds. Yeah.
If they needed more money for getting back to the war, then they spent more.
Because if you print, so this happens like prior to having the Federal Reserve. If you print money, do you have an answer to that?
Okay, so you keep
Yes, that's a new-
printing more money, and then the price of living goes up, and then the dollar is worth less.
Yeah. So if you print, exactly, it's inflation.
Hey,
So if you
Anna.
print currency, this would happen in Germany after World War I.
I
So
didn't know who was talking.
after World War I, Germany, they'd owe the Allies a lot of money after the Treaty of Versailles. And what they did, they just printed money and printed money. And it made it so that the currency lost its value. So it'd be like if I went to the store and if I bought a loaf of bread for $1, if the U.S. Mint, they kept printing money and printing money, all of a sudden my dollar wouldn't be able to buy a loaf of bread. I need $1,000 to buy a loaf of bread. It happens, the money loses its value. If you don't have gold, if you don't have something backing it, just printing money is not going to be enough. You need to have, basically all money is, in currency is it's representing like gold, or it's representing something real. Alvin.
What are you talking about?
The question was, if the United States needed to have more money to fight the war, why didn't they just print more currency?
And, didn't, Germany do that?
After World War I. But the answer is because it would have devalued the currency. It wouldn't have paid for the guns. Like just printing the money, it wouldn't have paid for the guns.
And, they printed so much money that, like, it barely cost anything.
Yep. So there were two kinds. They were called victory bonds and liberty bonds. These were American people were basically giving loans to the government for the war. Next slide. Come on. So here we go. So prior to this time, we talked about labor unions. We talked about during the Progressive Era, you have strikes, you have workers standing up for themselves. When World War I happened, the United States government, they say, you know, we can't allow unions to go on strike. We can't allow workers or companies to alienate their workers and create poor working conditions just for profits. We have to keep the factories open, because in doing so, we're going to be helping our troops overseas. We're going to be helping the Allies. We're going to help win the war.
But there were troops overseas.
So the U.S. government, they started something called the National War Labor Board. And the sole job of this this organization was to ensure that unions did not go on strike. Because there was a tremendous need for supplies, raw material, companies were able to increase wages. They adopted an 8-hour workday. They gave a lot of good benefits to workers, but in response, the workers, they were not allowed to go on strike. Can anyone tell me what this picture represents? This one is management, this is labor. Okay.
It's like, if we put those things together, we can win the war.
Sorry, one more time, a little louder.
If we put those things together, we can win the war.
Yeah, well, what does it say at the bottom, next to the tank and the airplane?
Fire.
Yeah, so Kyle, you want to add to it?
So since when the union labor, like when they went on strike, that meant that most companies weren't getting money that fast, and they basically weren't giving money to the government. So then the government wouldn't be able to fund the war.
Yeah, that's right on. They had to work together during the war because it was the business owners and it was the workers. They were all being patriotic. They had to keep the factories open. Cool. Next slide.
No,
Or is anyone still writing down the top one?
me.
Should have.
No.
So women and African Americans played a vital role in both the home front and in Europe itself during World War I. Because we needed to mobilize a large standing army in order to go fight the war in Europe, there was a labor shortage in the U.S. So 1 million women joined the labor force. They took on jobs that had traditionally been held by men. They worked in factories, shipyards, railroad yards. They served as police officers, mail carrier, train engineers. They showed the United States, especially men, that they were up to the task, that they could, that they were equal to men, and that they could do these jobs. Unfortunately, at the end of the war, when a lot of men came back from fighting, some of these women lost their jobs because they were fired. Mikhail?
Did you say yay?
Oh, I'm sorry. 300,000 people.
Wait, so it says 300,000 and 500,000
$300,000 to 500,000. So between 300 and 500,000. Yeah, so the Great Migration, again, there was an incredible need for labor. The Great Migration, it referred to African American moving from southern states where they were working on farms. You remember the sharecropper system. There was a lot of, there wasn't a lot of economic opportunity. But now northern factories, they were recruiting African Americans to come work in these factories in the north in order to build weapons, to build machinery. For instance, if you were working on a farm in the South, you might make 50 cents a day. But now in the industrial North, during World War I, you could go to a place like Detroit and work in Henry Ford's production factory and make $5 a day rather than making 50 cents a day. There'd be recruiters that would come down to the South and they would be willing to pay for your train ticket in order to come to the North or to come out West. So there was a great population shift, African Americans moving to northern cities, places like Chicago, places, cities throughout the U.S., moving from the South, moving to the North. Okay, next one. Cool. So propaganda, pretty much every picture we've looked at is a propaganda picture. Thank you. This committee was set up, the Committee on Public Information. Their job was to sell the war to the American people. So whether it was through posters, whether it was through speeches, whether it was through booklets, they had to convince Americans that Germany was the enemy and we had to win this war and be all completely united. They established something called 4-Minute Men. These were little short, they were performed at movie theaters. So if you went to the movies, every time before the movie started, like instead of seeing the previews to a recent movie, they'd show a patriotic clip or they'd have a speech telling you what was going on in Europe. They'd tell you, go buy war bonds, support our troops. And it was extremely effective. Oh yeah. Yeah, they because they didn't have daily news at that time. Like, they couldn't turn on the TV. Another thing, they would tell you to report draft dodgers. Does anyone know what a draft is?
Yeah.
No.
Isn't it kind of like a lottery?
It's so bad, Mom.
Yeah, that's 100%. Yep. So that's right. Draft. So you got it right. A draft is they select you randomly, and you have to go to the army. And Ahmad, you're right that a draft dodger is somebody who's skipping out. So the Committee on Public Information, they would tell you in these videos that you need to report draft dodgers because they're unpatriotic. Alvin, you want to add something?
Oh, and in South Korea, they train like everyone for like 2 years when they're in college. So if there's like a war breaks from the north and south, they could just call citizens or men to join the war. And
Christian. All right, that's good though. Gabe, you have a comment?
Why was the U.S. Army Reserve Corps?
So we had the Army Reserve at this time. We're going to talk in a minute about the draft. So even though we have a draft at this time, we still have volunteers as well. We have Army Reserve. We're mobilizing all of our armed forces. So it's not, we don't solely have a drafted army. You have volunteers, you have career military. Next slide. Go. So at this time, if you were going to criticize the draft, if you were going to criticize anything about the war, you could be accused of being a spy. You have this term, espionage. They look at the second and third letter, SP. You can remember espionage, spy. So we were going after spies at this time. Woodrow Wilson was okay with suspending freedom of speech.
Why are you
Christian.
sitting there?
They passed the Espionage Act of 1917. It made it illegal to aid the enemy, give false report, or interfere with the war effort. The United States, we targeted German immigrants. Anybody that we viewed as a threat, or even anybody who was speaking out against the war, was viewed as a threat. Yes?
Isn't that basically like kind of like the Sedition Act?
Yeah, so that's going to be the next one. You had the Sedition Act earlier. You learned about earlier in American history. It's going to come up again. 1918. It made it illegal to speak out against the war publicly. And some like Eugene Debs, the socialist that we learned about that ran for president, he speaks out publicly against World War I. He thinks that it's not a just war. The United States shouldn't be fighting it. He's arrested and he gets a 10-year jail sentence just for speaking out against the war.
Yay!
After he doesn't serve 10 years, after the war, they give the president pardons him, so he really only serves like I think a year in prison. But it's pretty crazy. I mean, over 1,000 Twizzit. Turn around.
He has my glasses. He has my broken glasses.
Give us glasses back.
No, I didn't.
All right, Twizzit, go first on the board. Okay. All right, Gabe. Come on, guys. Stay focused. Okay, so over 1,000 people were arrested for doing something as simple as protesting the war, saying that the war was not right, or trying to draft dodge, anything that they viewed as hurting the war effort. So the big historic case that you need to remember for your notes, Schenck v. United States. That was in your warm-up today. Essentially, Schenck questioned the constitutionality of the Espionage and Sedition Act, and what the United States government said was, even though in a way it was suspending freedom of speech, if your speech was creating a clear and present danger, the government could put it down. For instance, if I'm to walk into, if I go downstairs and walk into the cafeteria when you all are eating lunch and I yell fire, everyone's gonna freak out, trample each other. I could be arrested, even though in my mind, I'm exercising freedom of speech. I'm creating a danger. So that was the argument. The Supreme Court Justice Oliver Wendell Holmes, he said that because you were speaking out against the war, this was hurting American troops. This was hurting the war effort. Just something as simple as freedom of speech. It was sedition. So, yes. Yeah, but that was the argument of the Supreme Court. This is the case. Schenck said that, there should be freedom of speech. I should be able to criticize the war. The U.S. said, no, we should be able to do this because you're threatening American security. And the courts, they'd rule with the United States. So the Espionage Act, Sedition Act, even though it was silencing freedom of speech, it was legal during the war. And people were so patriotic, they were willing to accept it.
This, the phrase for Schenck versus the United States is clear and present danger. So if you cause clear and present danger, then you can't say it or do it.
Yeah. Clear and present danger. It's worth writing down.
That's something you'll learn in AP Government, so you'll learn this case again. For sure. I don't know what he's thinking.
Clear and present danger. That's like running into a building and yelling fire. I'm creating a clear and present danger. All right, next up.
So like when somebody talks, it's going to say that and shows ISIS.
That's you!
Yeah, that could be it.
That's what I do.
Okay, growing the army. So when World War I started, the United States, we had no interest in joining the war. Woodrow Wilson won the election for keeping the United States out of the war. That was his campaign. In 1917, we only had an army of 200,000. That was not nearly enough.
That's enough.
So we established something called the Selective Service Act of 1917. All the Selective Service Act was a draft. It drafted citizens between the ages of 21 and 30. They would essentially take a hat. If your name was picked out of it, you had to go to the army.
Did they still do that now?
So currently we still have the Selective Service. So for instance, because I'm an adult, I had to register my name to the Selective Service. That's like part of registering to vote. But we don't have a draft. We haven't had a draft since Vietnam. But in theory, if the United States wanted to, if we were ever under attack, they could use the Selective Service and have a draft again. But we have a volunteer army, completely professional military, so there's no draft.
Like ROTC, like.
Yeah, but those are all people becoming, we have volunteers, we have full-time military, but we don't just draft people. You're not forced into military service. Amina, yes.
But you can't draft like teachers and doctors.
can't have doctors yet. Especially doctors.
At the moment, at this time, they could draft anyone. They could draft, I mean, if you were an adult, they could draft you. So the military grew up, decide.
So, with the draft, did it matter what your occupation was? So, say you get drafted, but you're a doctor. Are you gonna go into the war as a doctor, like using those skills, or
Most likely, if you had a specific skill, like a medical skill, they would use you in a medical field. But so war, you're gonna let no. War is gonna change. At the very beginning of the war, when Germany got an advantage, the French army.
Okay, sit down. I don't want any, there's no reason why you're having a seat.
When Germany invaded Belgium, the French army, they went to the front line to meet the German military who had machine guns. They were using like Civil War era military tactic. They were wearing all red outfits. They were marching in lines. They were, this is completely old school warfare, and they got annihilated. I mean, machine guns against open lines.
who got annihilated?
The Allies, so the French. It took a little while for the Allies to catch up with their military tactics.
Oh, well,
Yeah, the Germans were a little more advanced to begin with, but the Allies would catch up.
What if you were drafted and you don't have any military?
They would train you. They would train
How
you.
many months?
I'm not sure. Again, so the question was, if you had no military training, they would send you to a training center. It'd be just like if you were to enlist in the army. They'd send you to a recruitment center, and then you'd be training. Even new immigrants, Latin Americans at this time, people that didn't speak English, they wanted to become fully assimilated Americans. They wanted to fight for their new country. They were drafted, or they were able to volunteer. What they do, they would send them to language schools where they'd learn English first, and then once they were ready, once they could speak English, then they were sent to the front lines as part of their training. So everyone was welcome. Here you go. Yeah, this is. Everyone remember this guy?
Uncle Ben.
Not Uncle Ben. Uncle Sam.
Our birds welcome. Mr. L, our birds welcome.
Our birds welcome.
What do you think birds would do? Look at that tax that pecked them to death.
Christian, what is this poster make you think of?
It's making me feel sad.
It makes you feel sad?
No, it's telling people to hurry up and volunteer for the war. Not to
I don't want
wait.
talking.
Just one moment. Christian's trying to share. Can I have everyone's attention? Okay. Sorry. Say that again, Christian.
The posters telling people to volunteer immediately, like right now, instead of waiting.
Yeah. You don't need to wait for the selected
I would do
service.
that.
Uncle Sam needs you now. Okay, next one.
I'll give you skills.
So African Americans and women played a huge role in this war as well. African Americans, 400,000 were drafted, 42,000 were sent overseas in combat units. Unfortunately, the combat units were still segregated at this time. There was a tremendous amount of racism. Most of the units were they were given jobs that were not combat units. There was a lot of people in the military that were hesitant to give the African American guns, which was completely messed up. But there were several units that were brave, that were very vital in winning the war for the Allies.
In the Revolutionary War, or yeah.
So none of them got
Yeah.
Long time.
How do they
Not
fight
happening.
with their bare hands?
So,
Guys, the stories of a woman pretending to be a male.
Deborah Sampson.
Guys, this is a lot different type of war. And society's way different. It's more advanced. So like women weren't sneaking in as men during this time. The Revolutionary War was very,
Deborah Sampson.
yeah, it was like not as functioning. It was not as organized. Where this is like,
It was boring.
you have medical checkups before you even receive like your uniform to make sure that you're like healthy and ready to go. Revolutionary War, they would have taken anybody who's gonna fight. So it's a lot different. This is a more This is what they call modern warfare.
So women are gonna join the war effort at this time. But again, this is gonna be the first war that they're officially allowed to enlist in or be drafted into. But they're gonna serve as non-combat. So they're not gonna be fighting troops. They're gonna do things like they're gonna be clerical workers, radio operators, electricians, pharmacists, chemists. Army Nurse Corps. Another huge need for women at this time was if you were bilingual, if you could speak French, they would want you working at like radio dispatch. So someone on the front line if an American unit needs to communicate with a French unit on the front line, you'd be there translating. So that was
Next time I
extremely
say your
important.
name for talking, I'm kicking you out of class.
So women, so again, you have women working at home, you have women working overseas. Shortly after World War I would end, does that ever remember what happened? What women finally achieved?
1920s.
Yeah, 1920s.
Separate.
Good. So this is huge. Women, they're empowered at this time. A lot of the stuff that's going to go on in World War I, working, the role they play in the war, they're going to demand their vote at the end of the war. So they really stand up for themselves. Next slide. Oh, I'm sorry. So that's it. Let's see. One other. Should I mention it? Okay. So real quick, I'm going to go
We're
out.
gonna go through it at a different time.
We're going to go over the activity.
Wait till these things.
So let me get everyone's attention. Attention. Okay. Okay. So you're gonna analyze these propaganda cartoons. Looking at these propaganda cartoons, there are gonna be some questions to ask about each one. Pretty self-explanatory. Then you're gonna read about women in World War I. There's a few questions to ask about what women's role in World War I was. Your final assignment. This is actually beautiful. Can I share this? Who did this? You wanna share what you did? It's beautiful.
No, this one's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Would you like me to share it? So here we have a beautiful propaganda poster. It says, "Labor Board, let's end this war and help your country." He wrote a couple sentences. He wrote, "It's time to get troops to help the U.S. win the war." That's what I want you to do. You can write a propaganda poster for Victory Gardens, anti-German. Be creative. And you have, I think, 4 minutes to work on it. So if you have any questions, I'll come around and help.
And then Jemima's gonna come around and have your homework out ready for.
Wait, Miss Cole, you took my.
Yeah, pull your homework.
I took it already. You gave it to me, I have it. Alright. But you didn't give it to me, I don't have it.
Is this poster?
Can I have someone volunteer to pass out something?
Me, I'm done with it.
So German.
I'll do it.
2 people would be great.
I like that.
Wait, I'll do it.
Not you.
Why?
Because you weren't paying attention to the question.
Okay, but I won. Wow. That's a rip. It's me, Hunter. I got a 5. I'm here. Leave me alone.
Here. I'm not okay.
I already turned it in.
So we need a bet right now.
So remember, since the test is on Tuesday, that means Monday there. So Ms. Gold has her hour study hour in the weekend to study. And then if you have any questions, that'd be a good time to.
And at 4:40 on Monday, we're going to be doing a competition for you.